Hello and thanks for joining me for some more landscape photography. In this video, as promised in my last, I'm going to be taking a look at the Laowa 6mm f2 lens for micro four thirds. Full disclosure, of course, Venus Optics got in touch and said, "We think your channel is absolutely fabulous. We can't understand why you haven't got many more No, they didn't say that. What they said was, "We'd like to send you this lens. Will you look at it for us?" And I said, "Absolutely, yes, I would," because I'd been on the verge of buying it anyway, so happy days. They sent it through and it's really good. So you don't need to watch the rest of the video. If you trust anything I've ever said, just go and buy it. If you're still here, let's have a chat about it. Well, there's a few things that stand out about this lens. You may be familiar with their previous one, which was the 7.5mm rectilinear lens. And that was a completely manual lens. And they started to gain something of a reputation for high quality optics with that lens, and then subsequent lenses as well. When they came out with a 6mm rectilinear lens, which they claim is zero distortion, then that made me sit up and take notice. I'm not a fan of the fisheye effect, and I have to say, don't tell anyone, but my 25mm f1.8 from Olympus has quite a bit of distortion, especially when I'm shooting seascapes. The horizon is often bent. So I did a test with this before anything else at all, as soon as I'd unboxed it. Here's an image looking out through the rather janky sunroom that I built on the front of the house. I picked this because there's some horizontals and there's some verticals, and as far as I can see, they're absolutely dead straight. Now, that might mean nothing because I built it myself, so it could easily be all over the place, but to my untrained eye, it looks pretty good. Now, I'm not really planning a detailed technical review of this because that's kind of not the sort of thing I do, and I'm not really qualified. What I'm interested in is what can it do in terms of creativity for my landscapes. So I'll put a link up at the top to my friend Jimmy Cheng's channel. Jimmy reviewed this from a different perspective, the technicalities, the specifications, some testing, and he shoots different subject material to me. He's not really a landscape photographer, so if you're interested in other genres, then I'd strongly recommend taking a look at Jimmy's review. There are some very specific things for landscapers that this lens delivers, though. First off, apart from the hood that comes with it, which, you know, it's a wide angle micro four thirds, so you're always going to have problems with flare on the lens because light is coming in from all angles. Field of view is 120 degrees. But what it does have is a 58mm filter thread. That's critical for me. If I couldn't put filters on it, it'd be no use to me at all. The objective lens doesn't bulge out like many wide-angle lenses do, so that's neat. And of course, as you can see, it's tiny. It's not actually very light, 180 grams, but obviously, you know, in terms of compared to full frame glass. The other thing is, unlike the 7.5mm, this has got electrical contact, so it's not completely manual. The focus is manual, but aperture can be controlled from the control dial on the camera. And what it also does is it triggers any focusing aids. So as you're manually focusing, it'll zoom in the EVF and fire up the focus peaking. Now, what I did with this to test it out, I was going to go and do some seascapes, as I mentioned in my last video, and technicalities, that didn't happen. I took it out into the hills and put it on the front of the camera and used no other lenses for the whole day. So I thought to myself, let's really see what this can do. And the short version is, I had a fabulous time with it. I really enjoyed it, and I will be using this an awful lot. The thing about the manual focusing, whilst the ring is really smooth, it's got focus stops at either end. I'll be honest, they're kind of irrelevant. What you tend to do with landscapes, you're shooting f5.6, f6.3, something like that. You set this to infinity, and everything from about 40 centimeters to the far horizon is pin sharp. So I sort of put it on, dialed it in. I didn't really touch it for the rest of the day, so it's really quite handy. But what it did allow me to do was to get creative. So let's take a look at how it worked out for me, and hopefully you'll see what I mean. Well, you wouldn't think that it's the middle of August, prime British summertime. It's absolutely freezing up here in the mountains. It's blowing a gale, so apologies if you can barely hear me. I'm out with a group of friends from my Facebook group, mostly Micro Four Thirds landscapes. And I've abandoned them because I found this composition here of this lovely old farm building that's derelict, but it's occupying a really prominent position in the landscape. And I thought this is a perfect opportunity to give this rather fabulous little Laowa 6mm wide angle lens a workout. I'd initially thought this might be about a 12 or 17mm shot, and it would be if I really wanted to fill the frame with this little cabin. But because the dry stone wall leading past it has got all this fabulous textured rock that's lying down in front of the cottage, it really leads you into the scene nicely, and I thought this is perfect for a 6mm lens. Now, a couple of things about using a lens like this. I'm shooting it at f5.6, and what that means is that I have no worries at all about focus. Everything from about 4 or 5 feet in front of the camera right to the far horizon is beautifully sharp, so that makes life easy. But of course, with this lens being not completely manual, in other words, it's only the focus that's manual, it's really handy because I can play with my aperture. I'm not having to muck about with an aperture ring, and of course I'm going to be getting lens data from the lens onto the EXIF of my images. But so far, in terms of usability, this lens is rather fabulous. With a 58mm filter thread, it's perfect, so I can just pop my 0.9 soft grad on, which, if you follow my channel for any period of time, you'll know is something that pretty much lives on my lenses. And this lens would be no use at all to me without the ability to put a filter on the front. I'm shooting this at ISO 640, which you might think is quite a high ISO in the middle of the day, but I wanted to get my aperture down to 5.6. And of course, this Laowa 6mm is a fast lens, but nevertheless, I've got to take account of it is a very long depth of field that I'm after here. So 5.6 is the usual sort of aperture that you'll find most of my landscape photography shot at. Now, what that would mean is that ISO 200, I'd have a really slow shutter speed. And all of this juncaceous soft reed that is creating the left and right borders of my image wouldn't be at all sharp. I need to freeze the action here. It's gusting about sort of 25, 30 knots. So, I mean, you know, you probably can't hear me anyway, so this might just get chucked in the bin, this whole piece. But if you can hear me, that's why. And I'm not scared of using high ISO. I've talked in the past about you have to use the tools that your camera gear affords you to get the image when conditions dictate. So whilst I'd like to shoot at 200 if I can, I'm not particularly nervous about shooting at 640. The days of high ISO noise in Micro Four Thirds cameras are long gone. I really enjoyed my day out with this lens, and I'm very happy with what it can do for me. And I'll certainly be making a lot of use of it in the future. I've got a few more images to show you at the end, but really, to wrap it up, as I said, not a technical review. This is all about If I needed something to create dramatic wide angles and that I can rely on it to create great quality images and I find it easy and convenient to use, then this does really tick all the boxes. And what I'd say to you is that if you are looking to sort of expand your creativity with your landscapes, you shoot Micro Four Thirds, try and have a look at it, get your hands on one, have a play with it. But to be honest with you, if anybody asked me, I'd just say go buy it. I really would. And, you know, I'm always really conscious about when I'm reviewing things as to, am I going to let people down? Am I going to recommend something that doesn't work for them? Which is why I'm reticent to do gear reviews. But if anybody asked me, should I buy it? I would say absolutely yes. I think you'll have loads of fun with it, and I think that you'll enjoy the results. So I'm going to leave it there for this one. A few more images coming up. I hope you found it interesting and helpful, and if you did, why not subscribe and join me next time. Cheers.